Year-on/age difference of 10 years/redemption/female leads growth direction/1v1/e/high sugar and pure sweetness. When I see you, love is like a summer rainstorm, surging wet. At the age of 16 in the summer, Zhao walked into a beautiful villa that seemed to exist in a dream, wearing a shirt with a deformed collar and washed white jeans. The man stood by the lotus pond, his shallow gaze falling on her like raindrops falling into the water, causing a ripple in her heart. Zhao knew she couldn't match him, so she dared to secretly sketch his outline in the draft, unable to express her sweet and sour love. But unexpectedly, it was another summer day, and the man held her tightly. A slightly trembling voice sounded in her ear, "Duo, do you want to choose me?" Duo is a nickname given to a girl by Zhou Jingnian. Because she is like the summer lotus under the sun, emerging from the mud without staining, standing tall and graceful, resilient and brave. He gradually raised her and watched her become confident, outgoing, and beautiful. The pink flowers with buds finally bloom, how could he let others pick them? Protect her, love her, Zhou Jingnian is very certain that he is the best flower keeper. Chapter 1. Rainy Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In summer, Qian Mountain Residence is located in northern Beijing. At 9:30 p.m., it rained heavily outside the window, splashing rain on trees and roofs. In the gate pavilion, the security guard was drowsy, propping their heads in spirits. Suddenly, he saw a girl carrying a bag in her hand, running to the door in the rain, wanting to bend down and drill into the community. The security guard quickly spoke up and called out to her, Hey, that lady. Wait a moment." He opened the door of the security booth and let the wet girl in. As a security guard in a high-end villa area, his attitude was very good. He took the initiative to hand the girl a disposable towel and said, "Miss, I see that you have a bad face. Are you not a resident here? Are you here as a guest?" The girl was blown by the cool air conditioning wind, and her wet face became increasingly pale. She looked like an old black shirt was tightly attached to her body, outlining her slender waist. The light blue jeans were wet with water and turned into deep blue. Her voice was not loud, with a slightly off Beijing accent. I'm new here, living in Villa number 16. On the 16th, Mr. Zhou's house. The security guard frowned and showed a questioning expression. He remembered that there was not such a thin and weak little girl among the people who frequently visited the Zhou family. The girl nodded and said, Zhou Jingnian, sir, home. The security guard thought for a moment and then asked, "What's your name? Do you have a door card?" The girl shook her head and clenched the opaque white shopping bag in her hand, seeming very nervous. "My name is Zhao, next to the Japanese character, there is a summoning call. I went out to buy things, but I didn't have a door card," she said, Zhao. The security guard tapped the keyboard a few times to confirm that the person was not on the list. "Alright, I'll call the 16th. If there's no problem, I'll let you in, okay? This is a request from our security team. Miss, you understand and understand." Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck outside the window, and the sound of thunder followed closely. Zhao seemed to be frightened, and his thin shoulders, which could see the shape of bones, shrank. She nodded and said, "Okay." The security guard looked around the room and handed her a security suit, saying, "Why don't you put it on first? It's clean and don't freeze." Zhao took the clothes and put them on, saying thank you. The landline beeped twice before being picked up, and the female voice on the other end said, "Hello." The security guard spoke respectfully, "Manager Chen, I am the on-duty security guard for today's community." A girl came to the entrance of the community and said she lives on the 16th. Her name is Zhao. Do you know her? Is Zhao with you? Is the security booth there? The female voice carried a hint of excitement. The security guard nodded repeatedly, but didn't realize that they couldn't see her at all. Yes, if you know her, would you like someone to come and pick her up, or should I have my colleague take her in? Steward Chen and the person next to her said a few words, but the security guard didn't hear her clearly. They only heard her reply, we came out to pick her up. Could you please help us? As expected, serving residents is our responsibility. The security guard waited for the phone to hang up before putting the microphone back on the landline. He pulled a chair for Su Zhao to sit down and poured her a glass of water. Miss Su, someone will be sent to pick you up on the 16th. Please sit down for a while and let me know if you need anything. The rainstorm outside was crashing down. Su Zhao held a disposable cup and drank a mouthful of water. The warm water dissipated a bit of coolness. She thanked again and moved her body, as if feeling a bit uneasy. The person who came to pick her up soon arrived. The black car parked outside the door booth, the back seat door opened, and a sturdy middle-aged woman hurriedly ran over holding a large black umbrella. The security guard opened the door and slightly bent down to welcome the woman in, saying, Manager Chen, you came in person. Chen Lin shook the water on the umbrella and approached Su Zhao with a worried expression on her face. She asked with concern, Xiao Zhao, are you okay? It's raining heavily and there's still thunder. Are you scared? Su Zhao stood up with a nervous expression and said, I'm fine, Aunt Lin. Did I cause trouble for you guys? I thought I could go back on my own. Oh, it's okay, it's okay. You're fine, you're worried about us. Chen Lin grabbed her cold hand and rubbed it hard, as if trying to make her warm. Go home, take a hot shower, don't catch a cold. Su Zhao nodded lightly, looked at the security guard sideways, said, thank you, and then asked, can I wash this clothes and return them to you? The security guard smiled and said, no need, just leave it here. We can handle it ourselves, or you can put it back on and throw it away directly. It's up to you for convenience. Chen Lin touched the material of the security uniform and frowned imperceptibly. She helped Su Zhao take off her clothes and said to the security guard, then let's leave it here. I'll trouble you tonight. I'll take Xiao Zhao back first, she said in a gentle tone. Chen Lin held an umbrella and helped Su Zhao into the car, shouting to the driver to increase the temperature of the air conditioning inside the car, and then wrapped Su Zhao in a big scarf. Su Zhao lowered her head and still held the shopping bag, her ears filled with Chen Lin's nagging concern. She only looked at the wet carpet of the car swimming around her canvas shoes, with a few water droplets sliding down her pale face, unsure if it was rain or something else. Xiao Zhao. Xiao Zhao. Chen Lin patted her shoulder with a worried voice. Su Zhao regained consciousness and smiled at her, saying, Aunt Lin, what's wrong? Chen Lin wiped the water off her face with a tissue and her movements were very gentle. You child, what's wrong with you? You're home now. She comforted her a few more words and said, Mr. Zhou was very worried about you just now. If he goes in later, his tone will become heavy. Don't take it to heart. You know, everyone's mood has been bad these days. Su Zhao looked up at the outside of the car window. The car was safely parked outside the iron fence, and the illuminated villa was shining brightly on a rainy night. She nodded obediently and said, Okay, thank you, Aunt Lin. Could you please? Chen Lin opened her umbrella and led Su Zhao's hand onto the cobblestone paved path. The rain mercilessly hit the delicate pink roses in the garden, making a crackling sound, and occasionally a few drops jumped onto Su Zhao's bare arms. A white satin fabric hung on the top of the villa door, gently swaying with the night breeze. 2 white chrysanthemum flower baskets were placed under the eaves, making it clear at a glance that someone had recently left this wealthy family. A servant was already waiting at the door, arranging clean indoor slippers for Su Zhao and Chen Lin. The two of them changed into the same style, with the first letter of their name embroidered on the shoes with deep yellow thread, and Su Zhao's name was SC. Su Zhao closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and followed Chen Lin into the bright living room. Please refer to the updated schedule as a statement. Chapter 2. You are also the master here. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The living room is spacious and bright, and the decoration style is Chinese. The shadow of the tree outside the floor window is shaking gently, and the rain is jumping on the leaves. The man in a black suit sat on the beige fabric sofa in the center of the living room, with long legs overlapping. He leaned slightly to his side, with his right elbow resting on the armrest, and a cigarette sandwiched between his well-defined fingers. Above a hint of red, gray smoke rose unsteadily. Upon seeing Zhao enter, Zhou Jingnian placed less than 1/3 of the cigarette he had smoked into the roughly gilded ashtray on the table, with a crisp and somewhat displeased gesture. Zhao put his hand holding the shopping bag behind him, trying to avoid his gaze, and spoke softly, "Mr. Zhou, I'm sorry." "What did you do?" Zhou Jingnian interrupted her without mercy, with a cold look in his eyes. He had already stood in front of Zhao at some point, perhaps because of the height difference. Zhao felt the pressure he brought. She lowered her head and didn't dare to look at him. "I'll go buy something," she said. Zhou Jingnian extended his left hand to her and looked down at her, saying, "What did you buy? Let me see. What exactly is it worth running out alone at night and getting drenched in such a ghostly way?" The girl's pale face was tinged with a faint blush, and her tone became awkward. "It's nothing, just a little bit of me, something I need to use myself." Zhou Jingnian squinted his eyes and spoke in a serious tone, "If you don't tell me, I'll just take it." Zhao felt like his body was about to be frozen, stiffness spreading from his heart to his limbs, and his tear glands were almost out of control. She tightly gripped the shopping bag, remained silent, didn't look up, and refused to give it to him. How could such a thing be seen by an almost unfamiliar man? She used to be scolded severely by that man even if she casually left it at home. Chen stood on the side and vaguely guessed what was in the little girl's bag. After hesitating for a few seconds, she spoke up to help her out. "Jingnian, what are you going to do with the things that girls use? It's so late, let Zhao go back and wash and sleep." Zhou Jingnian's outstretched hand stiffened, paused for a few seconds, and then withdrew from behind, saying, "I'm sorry, it's my tone that's not good, you." "I'm sorry." Zhao finally dared to look up at him, his wet eyes still carrying a hint of nervousness. "No, it's okay, I made you worry." On such a night, she ran out alone, leaving a note, but it was still very worrying. Zhou Jingnian bent down and took out a few tissues from the square wooden coffee table, handing them to her with a relaxed tone. "Wipe it. Why don't you tell Aunt Lin what you need? Or tell any servant, it's okay." Zhao looked up at the girl standing next to the sofa wearing a servant uniform, then lowered her eyelids and spoke timidly, "I forgot." "I'm sorry." Zhou Jingnian noticed her gaze and asked, "Zhao, don't lie to me, what's going on?" The rain outside seemed to be getting stronger, and the strong wind tore at the branches, making rustling sounds. Zhao's voice sounded like a mosquito. "I asked, and she said no." Zhou Jingnian lowered his head and looked at her level. "Who said that?" "Zhao, don't be afraid, tell me." The little girl, who was soaked all over, sniffed as if to regain some courage. She looked up at Zhou Jingnian's gaze, her voice was very quiet but not trembling anymore. "That one by the sofa over there." Upon hearing these words, Zhou Jingnian turned around and looked at him like a sharpened blade. "Is that you? Lin. What's your name?" Chen Lin frowned and walked over to the girl, standing in front of her and asking her, "Lin Yang, Zhao asked you for something, don't you help her find it?" The girl choked her neck, her hand trembling slightly in her abdomen. She opened her mouth but didn't say a word. Zhou Jingnian understood her situation and said, "Aunt Lin, settle her salary for this period of time and move out. The salary of the Zhou family is not meant to hire someone who is not dedicated." After dismissing the person, Zhou Jingnian turned back to look at Zhao and said softly, "Zhao, do you remember the day we first met? What did the old man ask you to call me?" Zhao blinked and called out to him, "Brother Jingnian." Well, Zhou Jingnian curved his lips with a gentle but firm tone, then you are my sister. You live here, not a servant or a pet, so there's no need to be so timid. His voice was gentle, but he had an air of indifference. Su Zhao, you are also the owner of this place. Stay calm and boldly command them that the Zhou family's salary is very high, just to let them take care of their employer, you know. Su Zhao nodded and unconsciously clenched the bag in his hand, making a crisp sound like a plastic bag. The girl's pale and thin face pulled out a smile, and her eyes lit up a bit. Zhou Jingnian also smiled and looked around the people standing in the living room. He casually pointed at the younger-looking one and said, "From now on, you can take care of Su Zhao. You don't need to do anything else. Let's adapt to life here with her." The girl smiled and her round face turned red with excitement. "Yes, Mr. Zhou. I will definitely do it well," she said. She looked at Su Zhao and introduced herself with a smile on her face. "Miss Su, my name is Yuan Yaoyao, 23 years old. I have just arrived here, but I am also quite familiar with her. If you have anything in the future, feel free to contact me. I will definitely handle it for you. Just call me Xiao Zhao." Su Zhao fell in love with her at a glance. A girl like little Sun is always likable. "Yao Yao, I'm 16 years old." Zhou Jingnian patted her shoulder with a hint of a smile in his tone. "Alright, they all know this. You don't need to introduce them. Go take a shower, soak well, don't catch a cold." When Yuan Yaoyao accompanied Su Zhao up, Zhou Jingnian's smile narrowed and his tone became cold and serious. "Don't let such things happen again in the future. Su Zhao is no different from me in this family, take good care of her." He sat back on the sofa, picked up his teacup and took a sip, then said calmly, "Go down. It's none of your business, rest early." The servants stepped lightly and lined up one by one to leave the living room, afraid of offending him again and losing this good job. Chen Lin sighed and said, "Jingnian, this matter is my fault. I didn't take care of the good people. Aunt's salary this month, you can deduct some from it. Chen Lin has been doing many things here for many years. Zhou Jingnian spends more time with her than with his own mother. How could she be punished for someone else's mistake?" Zhou Jingnian looked at her with a gentle tone and said, "It's okay, Aunt Lin. It's not your fault. If you feel really guilty, why don't you boil some ginger water for the little girl and serve it?" Chen Lin patted her thighs and hurriedly walked towards the kitchen, muttering, Yes, how did I forget? Although it was summer, I got soaked all the way and even blew cold air." Zhou Jingnian couldn't help but sigh again, leaned against the back of the sofa, and closed his eyes. Chapter 3. Like a Beautiful Illusion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The night was deep, and the rain was gradually decreasing. Villa number 16 of Qian Mountain residence also quieted down, and the room gradually turned off the lights. Su Zhao stood in the shower room, barefoot on the tiles, and hot water with a uniform flow rate and suitable temperature was sprinkled on her body. The wet shoulder-length short hair pressed against her face, not very comfortable, but she didn't have the heart to push it away. 2 days ago, she left the small county town in her southwestern hometown for the first time. Following Mr. Zhou's instructions on the phone, she bought the plane ticket to Beijing North at the agreed time. She doesn't have a bank card, so Mr. Zhou can't make any money to her. The long-distance flight cost up the little money left by my mother. When the plane landed, she looked at the unfamiliar scenery outside the dazzling window, her heart contracting in waves, and her nose getting sore, but she held back hard and didn't let tears fall. The people who came to pick her up were Chen Lin and the driver Uncle Wang, who brought her a big bouquet of flowers. They didn't take her home, but hurriedly took her to the hospital. The hospital corridor with a familiar smell of disinfectant was the place where Su Zhao first met Zhou Jingnian. The man sat alone in the empty hallway, leaning against the back of a bench, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, but his face had an indescribable fatigue. He saw himself and asked, "Is Su Zhao right?" He nodded and said, I'm Zhou Jingnian, I've called you before. So he nodded again and gave him a slight smile. Then there was the comfortably and warmly decorated ward, with an elderly man lying on the bed. He has grey hair, a slender figure, and several pipes inserted into his body, which looks very similar to his mother's final scene. However, his mother lives in a dilapidated and noisy 8-room apartment, and here, it is very quiet. On the first night I arrived in this city, the ticking instruments next to the old man emitted a long alarm sound, and then quieted down. The funeral was scheduled 7 days later, and Zhou Jingnian asked Aunt Lin to take him home and stay alone in the hospital to meet the people who came to bid farewell to the elderly. He must be very sad when such a thing happened, but he also did something wrong that worried him. Zhao wiped her face, turned off the shower, wiped her body clean, and put on the white nightgown that Yuan Yaoyao had put in. She searched around in the bathroom but didn't see a hair dryer, so she could only hastily wipe her short hair with a towel. With a slight cramp in his lower abdomen, Zhao also lost his energy and lay weakly in bed. This bed is so soft Zhao couldn't help but bend her lips, but the next second, she remembered what the old lady had said a month ago, "You disaster star. You harmed my son. Now you've killed your mother again. Whoever gets involved with you will be unlucky. Disaster star." Zhao closed her eyes, curled up in a ball, clutching the soft pillow with both hands, as if trying to grasp a beautiful illusion. The light in the girl's room on the 3rd floor went out with a snap, and Zhou Jingnian, sitting on the 2nd floor terrace, unconsciously looked up. He raised his hand to take a puff of smoke, and a wisp of smoke was slowly expelled from his mouth. A 16-year-old girl. Thin and sensitive, as if afraid of their own girl. That call from the southwest was the first one he received. Earthquake, saved Mr. Zhou Zheng, seriously ill. I hope you can take care of your daughter until she is admitted to college. Zhou Jingnian sneered at it at the time, thinking it was a poorly crafted fraudulent phone call. While eating, he casually mentioned it to his grandfather, but the old man was so excited that he almost burst into tears and urged him to quickly bring the little girl over. Unexpectedly, when we contacted the other side again, the mother had already passed away, and the grandfather, after accidentally slipping, never stood up again. Grandpa took a deep breath and, after seeing the girl, patted her hand and smiled, saying, "Good," before swallowing in a few hours. Mourning people came one after another, each with a mournful expression on their faces, but it was unclear how many were sincere. On the contrary, the little girl sat in the hospital hallway and shed tears all night, without sobbing or howling, only silently shedding tears, but with sincere sadness in her eyes. He has been busy dealing with others and arranging funerals these past few days, but he hasn't had a chance to have a good conversation with Zhao yet. Does she feel like she doesn't like her? So I didn't even dare to ask for help with sanitary napkins, so I braved the rain and walked 2 or 3 kilometers to buy them outside the community. Zhou Jingnian was a bit restless. He had never dealt with a little girl of his age, let alone a little guy like Zhao who was different from the girls he had seen. After smoking a cigarette, Zhou Jingnian still didn't feel sleepy. Insomnia may not be considered an illness for him, but it does bring some inconvenience to his life. Zhou Jingnian threw his cigarette butt into the ashtray on the table and stared at the crimson spark for a few seconds. Did he have to quit smoking because there was an extra underage in this family? Feeling restless again, Zhou Jingnian pinched his brow. Forget it, just quit it just to prevent Aunt Lin from nagging again. Chapter 4. Burn to a Red Face. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the early morning, everything was quiet, and the faint light gradually expanded from the east. The sunlight coated the earth with a layer of gold, and the flowers in the garden, which had been wilted by the heavy rain the night before, slowly looked up. Zhou Jingnian squinted his eyes slightly, feeling the warm warmth on his eyelids. He stayed on this recliner all night, sleeping for about 1 or 2 hours. He pressed on the slightly painful temple, sat up straight, and planned to go wash up. At this moment, the terrace door was pulled open and familiar footsteps sounded. Oh no! Zhou Jingnian was stiff all over, and his breathing paused for a few seconds. As expected, oh my little ancestor, why are you here so early in the morning? Zhou Jingnian tugged his lips and politely greeted, Good morning, Aunt Lin. Chen Lin frowned tightly and walked over, tilting her head to look at him. Jingnian, have you been sitting here all night again? Oh, what should I do if I catch a cold? How can my body tolerate this? Aunt Lin, you didn't sit all night, Zhou Jingnian joked, trying to end her nagging. You're lying down, don't worry. Chen Lin slapped him on the shoulder and said, You child, you can't listen to what Aunt says, can you? Zhou Jingnian stood up and spoke softly, Aunt Lin, I know now. I won't be able to do it again in the future. Don't worry, In the future, we need to set an alarm and go back to her room before she wakes up to work. Chen Lin picked up the broom and couldn't help but say, Jingnian, I also know that your insomnia can't be cured for a while, but you also need to pay attention to other aspects, don't you think? You have to go back to the house even if you can't sleep. How can you stay outside and blow a cold breeze all night? Zhou Jingnian answered several yes in a row and obediently agreed to her. Chen Lin is here with him, no different from her true elders. When faced with her nagging, he won't argue back. While she was sweeping the floor on the other side of the terrace, Zhou Jingnian said, I'll go wash up first, and hurriedly slipped away. Chen Lin looked at the cigarette butts in the ashtray and couldn't help but sigh, in this family, there is no one who can control him now. As a servant, even if she can say a few words, she cannot change anything. Chen Lin thought for a moment and called the kitchen, instructing them to cook 2 more servings of ginger water and give the gentleman a bowl. When Miss Zhao woke up, she would also drink another bowl. Yuan Yao also woke up very early today. She received a new task yesterday and was so excited that she couldn't sleep. Leaving aside the task of digging soil in the garden and washing vegetables in the kitchen, let's just talk about her new master. Miss Zhao. Who is so beautiful. Although she hasn't had much contact with her yet, she already genuinely likes her from the bottom of her heart. Yuan Yao looked at the time. Half an hour before breakfast was ready, she went upstairs and knocked on Su Zhao's door, saying, Miss Zhao, breakfast is almost ready. It's time to get up. Su Zhao is a newcomer, so he should spend more time with Zhou Jingnian and perhaps receive more care in the future. She waited for 2 minutes, but there was still no movement in the room, so she knocked again. Just shouting once in a few minutes, Yuan Yao stood outside the door for more than 10 minutes, but still didn't respond. She hesitated for a few seconds, gritted her teeth, and gently pushed the door in. Miss Zhao. I came in. Have you woken up yet? On the pink 2-meter bed, there is a small bump that slightly rises. The room is very quiet, and the people on the bed seem to be still sleeping. Yuan Yao's heart tightened and she quickly leaned over to take a look. The girl's face was flushed and her breathing was heavy, buried in the blanket. Yuan Yao was startled and pulled open the blanket covering Su Zhao's face, touching her forehead. The temperature touched by her fingers was very high, and Yuan Yao shook her shoulder again, shouting softly, Miss Zhao, Miss Zhao, Su Zhao, Su Zhao. Su Zhao frowned, feeling as if his headache was about to crack open. In a daze, he heard someone calling him and struggled to open his heavy eyelids. Yuan Yao was very close to her, looking at her red eyes with a hint of heartache in her tone. Miss Zhao, you have a fever, you can't wake up no matter how you shout, it scared me to death. Su Zhao sat up propped up in bed, feeling his throat dry and sore. I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Yuan Yao quickly draped the blanket over her and said, It's okay. Just wake up and you'll be fine. Lie down a little longer, and I'll go find Aunt Lin and ask her to call a doctor over. Call a doctor over. Su Zhao had a severe headache and didn't understand her words. She followed Yuan Yao's strength and lay back. I woke up again because of a slight tingling sensation on the back of my hand. Opening his eyes, he saw several people standing by his bed. Mr. Zhou, Aunt Lin, Yao Yao, and a stranger wearing a shirt. She instinctively withdrew her hand and shouted in a hoarse voice, "Mr. Zhou." Zhou Jingnian held onto her shoulder and didn't let her sit up. "You're sick, you should have been caught in the rain last night. Lie down well," he said. His gaze fell from her face onto the stranger man and said, "This is Dr. Zheng Huaibua, here to see you. The hanging bottle has just been hung, and it will take half an hour to finish." Su Zhao nodded and rubbed his short hair against the blanket, making a rustling sound. "Thank you, Mr. Zhou, and thank you, Dr. Zheng." Zheng Huaibua held a temperature probe and beeped it on her forehead, recording the temperature in her medical record book. He laughed a few times and said, "You little girl, you're really interesting. Why are you so polite?" Yuan Yao Yao took an insulated bag and filled it with hot water, placing it under Su Zhao's hand with a needle. Su Zhao said again, "Thank you Yao Yao." Zhou Jingnian looked at her reserved expression and spoke softly, "Xiao Zhao, you don't need to be so polite. We are all family members." Su Zhao curved his lips and smiled, giving a soft, After recording his condition, Zheng Huaibua also told him to remember to remove the needle and take his medicine on time. Chen Lin took note one by one and respectfully escorted the doctor out. After all, someone else is an expert-level doctor who was called home to show her child a cold. Chen Lin was smiling, afraid of neglecting him. Yuan Yao Yao took a towel to wipe Su Zhao's sweaty hair, then left the room and said to decorate her with congee. Zhou Jingnian pulled a chair over and sat down by her bed. Su Zhao still felt a headache and was very tired, but he still sat up, propped up his energy, and spoke to him, "Mr. Zhou, I'm sorry to trouble you again." Zhou Jingnian smiled helplessly and said, "Look at you, you're apologizing again." "Xiao Zhao, as I said before, if you stay here, we will be family, so there's no need to be so reserved and polite." The man spoke calmly and seriously. "Right." Su Zhao instinctively wanted to apologize again, paused, and nodded lightly. "I remember." Zhou Jingnian poured her a cup of warm water, hesitated for a few seconds, and then asked, "Last night, when I came back, it rained. Why didn't I make a phone call to my family and have someone answer it?" Su Zhao's hand holding the cup tightened a bit, and his fingertips slightly turned white. I don't have a phone." Zhou Jingnian looked at the girl's flushed face and felt a surge of guilt in his heart. "I'm sorry, I didn't consider it. I'll have someone buy you one soon. If you have anything in the future, feel free to contact me or contact Aunt Lin." Su Zhao smiled at him without evading. After all, it was inconvenient here without a phone. "Okay, thank you, Mr. Zhou," he said. Chapter 5. Buy whatever you want. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Jingnian sighed and said softly, "Xiao Zhao, are you very dissatisfied with my cheap brother?" Su Zhao was startled and sat up straight, saying, No, cough cough cough." Zhou Jingnian was startled by her cough and bent over to gently pat her back. "I was joking, don't worry, he said. The girl's back under his palm was so thin that it seemed to have no flesh, and he could feel the protruding spine under the thin skin. Zhou Jingnian couldn't help but frown. Su Zhao stopped coughing and her already flushed face seemed to turn a little red. She said seriously, "Mr. Zhou, I really didn't think you were bad. You're good, everyone here is good." Zhou Jingnian also said seriously, "Then don't call me Mr. Zhou anymore. You can call me my brother, Jingnian's brother, or Jingnian. If he promised his grandfather to take good care of this girl, he would never break his promise. He genuinely wanted to be family with her." Su Zhao was taken aback for a moment before realizing it. His voice was very soft and he said, "Okay, brother Jingnian, I remember." Zhou Jingnian was satisfied and rubbed her head with his big hand, causing the girl's short hair to become a bit messy. He took out a thin hard card from his pocket and stuffed it into her hand, explaining, "Take your brother's welcome gift. If you have anything you need or want in the future, just use this money to buy it." Jingnian held her hand and didn't let her refuse. "We have a lot of money at home, you don't have to worry, and spend it boldly." Zhao grabbed the card, but before he knew it, there were 2 taps at the door. It was Yuan Yaoyao who came in with congee. Taking advantage of this gap, Jingnian stood up and said she was going to work, asking her to rest well. After that, he walked away with long legs. Zhao sat on the bed, his hard card pressing against his palm, leaving 2 red marks. She opened her mouth in vain, unable to say goodbye to him. Yuan Yaoyao put the tray firmly on the bedside table. On the tray was a small bowl of light porridge and a small plate of boiled vegetables and meat slices. She took out a small table from the nearby cabinet and spread it out on the bed. Zhao pulled out a smile and said, "Yaoyao, you are much more familiar with this room than I am. Just call me Yaoyao." Yuan Yaoyao thoughtfully placed 2 tissues on the table. Because this room was cleaned up by us all together, and everything was thought of by Aunt Lin and everyone together. Zhao picked up the spoon and smiled with some gratitude, saying, "Thank you all." Yuan Yaoyao looked at the door and cautiously approached, "Isn't Mr. Zhou very handsome?" After asking, she raised her eyebrows in a gossipy manner. Zhao evades her sight and sips congee. Yuan Yaoyao didn't tease her anymore because of her shyness. "Well, you can eat congee. This meat slice is very delicious. Try it quickly. I'll take away the dishes after eating." Zhao let out a soft, sound again. After eating congee, Zhao regained some strength and sat chatting with Yuan Yaoyao for a while. When there were still a few drops left in the bottle, Lin came up on time to pull out the needle for her. Zhao was puzzled and said, "Aunt Lin, do you still know how to do this? It's so impressive." Lin smiled and said, "Mr. Zhou, it's Grandpa Jingnian. He has some old problems. When he was still here, I often gave him injections, and he became a half-nurse." Thinking of the kind-hearted grandfather, Zhao couldn't help but droop her eyelids and her eyelashes trembled slightly. Upon seeing this, Lin knew that the child had a kind heart, probably because she had a close relationship with the old man. She had only met him once, but she was able to really take the old man to heart. She sighed and said, "If you had come over earlier, the old man would definitely have hurt you as a granddaughter, even more than Jingnian." Zhao looked up at her, his eyes slightly reddened, and his smile was somewhat forced. Lin helped her lie down and carefully tucked her in the corner, saying, "Let's not talk about these things anymore. Zhao will sleep a little longer and get better. Let's go see the old man off together in a few days." Zhao pursed her mouth and nodded obediently. When she woke up again, it was already noon. "Raise your hand and touch your forehead, the temperature seems to have dropped." Zhao opened the curtains and squinted under the sunlight. Outside the landing window, there is a balcony full of flowers. Pink, yellow, and yellow flowers are among the dark green leaves, which are wilted by the hot noon sun. After burning all night and feeling sticky with sweat, Zhao went to take a shower first. When she went downstairs, Lin happened to come back from outside. Zhao greeted her and said, "Aunt Lin, you're back. Hey, has Xiaoxiao's fever subsided?" "It's already fine, there's nothing uncomfortable." Lin looked at her face, which was indeed slightly rosy. She felt relieved and said, "That's good. Eat something, sit and watch TV for a while. When the sun gets less hot in the afternoon, let Yaoyao take you outside to familiarize yourself with the surroundings of your home." "Okay." After finishing the yangchun noodles cooked by Lin, Zhao stood in front of the TV cabinet and watched for a while. She couldn't figure out where the switch was, but Lin had already entered the kitchen and was too embarrassed to ask anyone. Looking at the large wooden coffee table again, Su Zhao tried to pick up the white remote control and pressed the small switch, watching the screen light up smoothly, and finally breathed a sigh of relief. The room she and her mother rented doesn't have a TV, and her mother often goes out to work night shifts at night. After finishing her homework, she stays in bed and reads for a while. Most of our understanding of the outside world comes from multimedia computers in school and sharing with classmates. This TV has developed too quickly. Su Zhao grabbed the remote control and sat on the sofa, quietly sighing. The functions displayed on the screen were diverse, and she didn't dare to press them randomly. She only clicked on the first function that looked like a TV. As soon as it opens, there is a documentary channel showing a documentary about ancient history. Su Zhao had not read this before and unconsciously became fascinated, feeling that the words in the history book seemed to have been moved into the images. Chen finished handling things and came out to see the little girl motionless. She smiled and said, "Xiao Zhao also likes to watch this." It took Su Zhao a few seconds to react, but she didn't hear what she was saying clearly. "Aunt Lin, did you just talk to me?" Aunt Lin said, "Do you also like watching these documentaries?" Yuan Yaoyao emerged from somewhere and said with a smile. Su Zhao glanced at the TV screen and nodded awkwardly, it's very interesting. Chen poured a cup of warm water onto the coffee table and said, "Jingnian also likes to watch this channel." "Oh my, I, as an uneducated person, can't understand it. I just feel sleepy." "Me too, I only like watching idle dramas about dating," Yuan Yaoyao said as she pulled down the blinds. Su Zhao watched as the reflection on the screen disappeared and silently wrote down, "You can pull the curtains when watching TV with reflection." Coincidentally, after this episode was released, Su Zhao looked at the time and it was already after 4 p.m. She was startled to find herself sitting here watching for over 3 hours. Su Zhao quickly stood up and said, "I've finished reading it, Aunt Lin. Do you want to see it?" Chen waved her hand and said, No, the small TV in my room looks much more comfortable than this big guy." Yuan Yaoyao came over and grabbed Su Zhao, saying that there was still some time before dinner, and asked her if she wanted to go and see the garden. Su Zhao nodded and walked out of the room with her. Chapter 6. Is me, Zhou Jingnian. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's still early, more than 2 hours before the sun sets, but compared to noon, the fireball hanging in the sky has calmed down and the temperature is more comfortable and pleasant. Yuan Yaoyao carefully introduced the structure of Zhou's house to Meng Xiai. The first floor of the main building is the living room, kitchen, and Mr. Zhou's bedroom and study. As the elderly have difficulty walking, living on the first floor is more convenient. The second floor is Zhou Jingnian's bedroom, study, as well as his parents' bedroom. The large terrace on the second floor is Zhou Jingnian's favorite, and when you can't find him, you can go there and take a look. The third floor is a guest room and a room for storing books and belongings. One of them is currently occupied by Su Zhao, and relatives may come in during holidays and festivals. The left side building is occupied by female servants led by Chen, while the right side building is occupied by male servants such as the garden and driver. There are still many vacant rooms left. Su Zhao reached out to touch the pink flowers by the cobblestone path, and her short hair was gently blown by the wind. "You guys are really big here," she said. Yuan Yaoyao hugged her arm and said, "When I first arrived 2 months ago, I also felt that this family is too wealthy. I won't be able to earn such a villa in 10 lifetimes." Su Zhao deeply believed that the villa in the north of Beijing also had a considerable courtyard. If it weren't for Grandpa Zhou's kind heart, she probably wouldn't have had much chance to come into contact with such a family. As she reached a stone step that was turning, Yuan Yaoyao spoke out as a reminder, "Be careful not to slip. The old man fell here." Her voice gradually decreased, as if she was a bit sad. Turning the corner, the view opens up again, which is different from the romantic and fresh front yard. This is a traditional classical courtyard style. Su Zhao looked at the red-tiled roof of the pavilion and spoke softly, Grandpa Zhou, he is a very good person. Yeah, I accidentally broke one of his expensive cups before, and he wasn't angry. He just punished me to wash dishes in the kitchen for a month, Yuan Yaoyao said with a tone of melancholy and reluctance. Unfortunately, he couldn't spend more time with you. Su Zhao's gaze fell from the treetops to the lotus pond, and he squatted down to look at several carp in the water. I will remember him for a lifetime, and I will never forget him, he said. Yuan Yaoyao looked at the girl's thin but inexplicably stubborn figure, smiled, and changed the topic. Mr. Zhou is also very good, Xiao Zhao, you can stay at ease. She also squatted down and whispered to Su Zhao, and he doesn't have a girlfriend, no messy girlfriends, so no one would dare to bully you. Su Zhao paused as he fiddled with the pool water and said, These have nothing to do with me. She stood up and smiled, Yao Yao, thank you for accompanying me today. Yuan Yaoyao could tell that she didn't really want to continue the topic, so she followed her words and said, Oh my, this is my job. Thank you. Su Zhao is not used to the atmosphere at home yet. During lunch, Aunt Lin refused to sit down and eat together, saying that she was the master and that eating together was not in accordance with the rules. Su Zhao couldn't resist her and could only have lunch without hesitation. She still cannot treat them as servants and accept their care calmly. Fortunately, Yuan Yaoyao also knew she needed to adapt. Mr. Zhou said this morning that I would accompany you out for a walk tomorrow. Do you want to go somewhere? After thinking for a moment, Su Zhao realized that apart from those famous attractions, she had no idea about the city, but obviously, what Zhou Jingnian said about strolling should not be that kind of place. So Su Zhao only replied softly, You decide. I don't quite understand. Okay, then I'll discuss with Aunt Lin tonight and make sure you have a great time. The two little girls hid in the backyard and chatted for a while. Su Zhao also took the opportunity to ask the names of several aunts and uncles in the room. My mother once said, remembering the right name is the most basic respect for people. The dinner was still eaten by Su Zhao alone. Chen Lin said that Zhou Jingnian was going to the airport to pick up his aunt's family who had come back from abroad to mourn, have dinner with them, and then take them to the hotel. They will come back home to stay tomorrow, and I don't know why they stayed at the hotel tonight. Chen Lin put away the remaining food and took it to the auxiliary building to share with everyone later. Su Zhao found it very difficult to accept the fact that she had to give her leftover food to someone else. She stood at the dining table, feeling more uneasy than the knots in her hair that had not been combed for 10 days. She whispered, Aunt Lin, why don't we leave this dish alone? It'll be hot tomorrow and I'll eat it myself. Chen Lin chuckled and said, Xiao Zhao, it's nothing. It's not good to stay overnight with leftover food. Besides, what can't we eat this big fish and meat? Yes, look at this big crab. It's so fat. If you eat it yourself, I won't have to pick up any leftovers, Yuan Yaoyao said with a smile. Su Zhao had no choice but to listen to them. Chen Lin asked her again if she wanted to watch TV, but Su Zhao hesitated for a few seconds and said she wanted to go back to her room. Yuan Yaoyao followed her to the room and taught her how to adjust the temperature of the air conditioner and how to use the projector. After Yuan Yaoyao left, Su Zhao pressed all the buttons on the projector herself, feeling that the built-in functions in the console were similar to those of the TV downstairs. As for what Yao Yao said about phone screen projection, she didn't have a phone and couldn't try it. She turned off the projector, sat down at the desk, and opened the books she had brought from home. She doesn't know when the school starts here, nor does she know the course progress and teaching style here, so she can only read more old books. Students in big cities should be very impressive, right? Su Zhao's right thumb and index finger pinched the corner of the book, causing a surge of tension and fear in his heart. Knocking, the sudden sound from the door pulled Su Zhao out of her thoughts. She turned her head to look, but didn't react and didn't immediately make a sound. Xiao Zhao, it's me, Zhou Jingnian. Did you sleep? Perhaps because there was no response inside, the man outside called out to her. Zhao stood up from the chair and ran over to open the door. Sorry, I just. Jingnian smiled and said, It's okay. Aunt Lin cut the fruit, and I'll bring it to you by the way. He lifted the box from his hand and shook it in front of her, saying, And this one, I had my assistant run around today to buy it. Zhao's gaze followed his words, shifting from the man's eyes to the fruit tray and then to the box. Will you come in and sit down? Brother Jingnian. Jingnian glanced at her cute pale yellow pajamas and the neatly arranged bedding in the room, making sure that his sudden visit would not have any negative impact on the little girl. He happily carried a fruit platter and walked in. He pointed to the double sofa and said, Can I sit here? Sure, you can sit down. Jingnian placed the fruit tray on the table and handed the box to her, saying, Take your phone. Press this button to turn on the device, this is the volume button. Jingnian pointed to her for a while without touching Zhao's hand. I have already processed your phone card. The number is on the note in the box, and there is also WeChat. I have registered one for you. My contact information, phone number, and WeChat have been saved, and so has Lini's. If you want to add someone else, you can click here. Zhao followed his words and clicked on the buttons on the screen one by one, recording what he had taught. Jingnian taught a rough idea, leaving her to explore the rest on her own. Zhao looked at the missing apple on the back of his phone and looked up at the man eating fruit. Is this very expensive? Chapter 7. He is very good. Looking. You are listening at novel full. Audio. Is this very expensive? Upon hearing this, Jingnian looked up at the girl sitting on the small stool across from him. The light was bright, making the ends of her short hair a bit yellowish. Malnutrition. Jingnian smiled and thought about asking Aunt Lin to supplement her nutrition more, while saying, It's nothing to me, so don't take it to heart, okay? Zhao looked at him for a few seconds, nodded obediently, and said thank you. Jingnian pushed the fruit tray towards her and said slowly, What were you doing just now? Reading, school is about to start. Jingnian paused for a few seconds before asking, Which version of the textbook did you originally use? I will contact the teacher to see if there are any areas that need to be adapted in advance. Zhao stood up and walked to the desk to pick up a few books, secretly smoothing out the corners of the books that had been raised for some unknown reason. She put the book on the table and showed it to him. This is from the People's Education Press. The side edges of the textbook are slightly yellow, and some colored covers have fallen off the edge of the cover, revealing the white fur paper in the middle of the paper. It can be seen that the owner has looked at them many times. Although they are carefully taken care of, there is still some wear and tear. Jingnian asked her, Can I take a look? Zhao agreed without hesitation, feeling inexplicably nervous as he grabbed the stitching on the side of his pajama pants legs under the table. His well-defined fingers gently flipped open the familiar paper, while his thumb and index finger rubbed the corners of the book. Jingnian scanned the table of contents at a glance and quickly flipped back. In the main text, some neat handwriting appeared in the blank space, which were notes taken by Zhao, mostly written in neutral black, red, and blue pens. This is a history textbook. Next to the illustration in the first lesson, a black pen drew an arrow from the standing person's head toward several black shadows on the left. A few small words were written next to it. Surprisingly not evolved, followed by 4 or 5 exclamation marks. Jing smiled young and pointed his finger on the picture, You have quite a wide range of knowledge. Zhao blinked his eyes and lowered his head to avoid his gaze. Yes, I saw it in a magazine, I don't know if it's true, he said, It's okay, I don't know either. Evolution theory is too complicated. Jingnian let go of her textbook and said, When my assistant went to transfer you, your former teacher said your grades were very good. Zhao blushed and stuttered as she spoke, no, it doesn't count, it's just that on our side, everyone is average. Zhao, Zhou Jingnian looked at her with a gentle gaze, I believe you can be great here too. Su Zhao's eyelashes trembled and he said, I will work hard. Do you have any favorite universities now? You can set a goal first. Su Zhao shook his head and said, I haven't thought about it yet. When she was in her hometown, she only knew the undergraduate admission line and first-year admission line listed by her teacher. The specific school was too abstract for her. Zhou Jingnian suddenly looked up and rubbed her head, making her short hair messy. His eyes narrowed with a smile and he said, it's okay, take it slow, walk steadily step by step, and the result won't be bad. The new school has been found. I'll ask when I can take you to see it. Su Zhao looked up at him, and the man had a warm smile, with his big hand covering her head, which was different from many boys who had appeared in her life. Brother Jingnian, thank you. If it weren't for you and Grandpa Zhou, I really wouldn't know what to do, Su Zhao said with a sincere expression in his eyes, you don't need to thank me. Your mother saved my grandfather's life, a drop of water's kindness. As a reward, the things I have made for you now are far from enough, so there's no need to say thank you to me anymore. Su Zhao pinched his right index finger with his left hand, and his smile became somewhat forced. My mother, she didn't tell me how she met you guys. It's okay, I know. I'll tell you, Zhou Jingnian said with a relaxed tone, the matter is actually very simple. His grandfather, Mr. Zhou Zheng, is a geologist who likes to run to various mountain nests. When I was running to Su Zhao's hometown, I happened to encounter an earthquake and was crushed by a big tree that had broken on my waist. Su Zhao's mother was doing farm work in the mountains, and when she ran home, she saw the old man. She helped him move the tree that had been crushed for nearly 20 minutes and then called for someone to come and carry him back to the village. Zhou Jingnian's eyelashes drooped slightly and his throat tightened. Grandpa's legs and feet are not good, which is also a sequela of his injury. However, without your mother, he may not be able to go home, not even for the next decade or so. Su Zhao's gaze fell on his face, not knowing how to comfort him. He whispered, Brother Jingnian, don't be sad. Zhou Jingnian curved his lips and said, it's okay. He's so old and hasn't suffered much. It's considered a funeral. He didn't seem to be used to sharing emotions with others, so he stood up and ended the conversation. It's late, let's rest. I also went to wash up. Su Zhao let out a soft, and said in a soft voice, good night, Brother Jingnian. Zhou Jingnian turned around and glanced at her. The little girl was more than one head shorter than him, wearing loose pajamas on her body, and the hem swayed slightly with her movements. He slightly bent down and looked at her deer-like eyes, saying, children, go to bed early, otherwise you won't grow taller. After speaking, Zhou Jingnian walked away with long legs. Su Zhao only then noticed that when he came in, he only half closed the door and left a considerable gap. She looked at the empty corridor and stood in place for several seconds before coming forward to close the door. A gust of wind suddenly blew up her pants legs, and the cool wind crawled up from her ankles, causing the pores on her legs to shrink. Brother Jingnian Su Zhao lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. The ceiling light in the room is in the shape of clouds, and when turned off, it still emits a sparkling dim light. Su Zhao is not sure what this is. She pulled the neatly stacked air conditioner at the end of the bed, opened the cover on her body, and rolled herself up. In the darkness, the man's profile appeared in the girl's mind for some reason. He is very good-looking, and can be said to be beautiful. The nose bridge is high and straight, the jawline is clear, and the eyebrows are thick. When drinking water and eating, the Adam's apple will roll up and down. Su Zhao believes that Zhou Jingnian is the most beautiful person he has ever seen, even more beautiful than the celebrities on TV. Chapter 8. The Soft and Soft, Good Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At 6:30 in the morning, Zhou Jingnian was awakened by a string of WeChat prompts. It's a message sent by the assistant. Zhou Jingnian leaned against the bedside, frowning tightly, typing with his phone in one hand. After the old man left, many members of the group began to stir up, and within a few days, many things came out. He got out of bed and lazily walked into the bathroom. After brushing my teeth, I still felt drowsy, so I took another shower. When warm water poured on his body, Zhou Jingnian still felt a bit surprised. He fell asleep around 2 o'clock last night and surprisingly slept soundly until dawn. This is really rare for him. I didn't do anything very tiring yesterday, nor did I drink alcohol. Oh, I went to chat with the little girl for a while. He remembered the soft, good night sound. It's impossible. The man pulled off the towel from the shelf and decided to attribute it to not smoking in the past 2 days. Well, smoking is harmful to health. When Zhao went downstairs, Zhou Jingnian was already sitting at the dining table eating breakfast. He is used to toast, fried eggs and coffee in the morning. The slightly bitter smell of coffee in the restaurant is mixed with the aroma of Zhao's lean congee. He saw Zhao and said, "Good morning, Zhao. Did you sleep well?" "Good morning, brother Jingnian." Zhao was in a good mood and smiled at him. "It's pretty good, and you?" Lin happened to come out of the kitchen carrying a side dish and mercilessly interrupted Zhou Jingnian's words before he could say anything. "He's a fairy who doesn't need to sleep. When will he sleep better?" Zhou Jingnian looked up helplessly and said, "Aunt Lin. What's wrong? Are you not convinced? Did Auntie say something wrong?" Zhou Jingnian put down his fork and said, "That's really wrong. I slept for over 4 hours last night." 4 hours. Zhao's eyes widened slightly. "He only sleeps this little every day, really won't he faint?" Unexpectedly, Lin became excited and said, "Really? What did you do yesterday to sleep for so long?" So he can't even sleep for 4 hours on weekdays. Too busy. Or insomnia. Zhou Jingnian shook his head and said, "I don't know either." He shifted his gaze back to Zhao and chuckled, "What are you doing standing up for? Sit down and eat quickly." The lean meat congee was so soft and delicious that Zhao ate the whole bowl spoonful by spoonful. She ate while Zhou Jingnian introduced her to the school. He chose a decent private high school in northern Beijing, about 10 kilometers away from the residential area, with a decent location. "I have contacted Nan Yun's teacher and they said they can take you there anytime. Tomorrow happens to be Saturday, can I go with you?" Zhao held the spoon and thought for 2 seconds. She didn't have any problems, but, the day after tomorrow is not Grandpa Zhou. Zhou Jingnian smiled and said, "It's okay, everything is ready." "Okay, I can do anything. I have discussed with Aunt Lin and we have selected the better one in the parallel class for you. If you can keep up, you can also be promoted to a key class in the future." After he finished speaking, Zhao followed suit and said, I will work hard." "How well behaved." Zhou Jingnian picked up his chopsticks and put a fried egg on a small plate next to her bowl. "The driver will bring my aunt's family over later," he said. He paused and said, "My cousin has been spoiled by our family and has a rather spoiled temper. If she says anything unpleasant to you, just tell me, don't hold on." Upon hearing these words, Zhao was taken aback. No need to endure, this sentence has never been told to her before. When you were still a child, just endure until your father wakes up from drinking. Growing up a bit, my stomach was so hungry that I couldn't sleep. Just hold back a bit, and the day broke. She suppressed the sourness in her heart and nodded lightly. Zhou Jingnian took out the screen and looked at it. It was past 8 o'clock, and he stretched his neck to look at the kitchen. "Aunt Lin. Aunt Lin." Lin walked out with wet hands and said, "So what's wrong with my little ancestor?" Zhou Jingnian raised his chin at Zhao and said, "In the afternoon, let Yuan Yaoyao accompany Xiao Zhao out for a stroll and buy some new clothes. Okay, I'll go talk to Yaoyao. Su Zhao spoke weakly, Brother Jingnian, my clothes are enough to wear. Zhou Jingnian blocked her directly and said, what are you planning to wear for Grandpa's funeral? Seeing the little girl stop talking, his tone softened and he said, buy some beautiful dresses. It will be more convenient to go out and play with friends when I go to school in the future. Su Zhao stared at him for a few seconds before insisting, okay. At around 9 o'clock, the driver called and said that he had already picked up his aunt's family at the hotel and would be home in about half an hour. Zhou Jingnian waited with Su Zhao in the living room and introduced him in advance, saying, just follow me and call me Tang-gu or uncle. If you feel uncomfortable, you can also call them Aunt Zhou or Uncle Tao. Their daughter's name is Tao Yining, 1 year older than you. He lowered his voice as if whispering, I really have a bad temper. When the funeral is over, I need to quickly send this Buddha away. Su Zhao chuckled and his eyes curved. Zhou Jingnian raised his eyebrows and said, what are you laughing at? Brother Jingnian, it's like saying bad things about others like this. He looks very different from what she had imagined before. Zhou Jingnian said nonchalantly, this is not bad news, it is a fact. You will definitely feel it in the next few days. The SUV drove into the yard through the side door, and a pair of exquisitely dressed middle-aged men and women got off the car first. Then there was a girl wearing a pink dress and small leather shoes, with fair skin and flowing long hair. Zhou Jingnian welcomed him with a smile and said, Tang-gu, uncle, Yin, this is Su Zhao. He tilted his face slightly toward Su Zhao and said, Xiao Zhao, this is the aunt, uncle, and cousin I just told you about. Su Zhao was a bit nervous, holding her hands in front of her and saying, hello Aunt Zhou, Uncle Tao, Sister Yin. Hello, Su Zhao, Zhou Jia said in a gentle tone. Tao Chen also nodded at her. The bad-tempered Tao Yin mentioned by Zhou Jingnian looked at her from top to bottom with a light and ethereal tone. Hello. Zhou Jingnian couldn't help but frown as he looked at Tao Yin and said, let Aunt Lin take you to the guest room first. Uncle Zhang, you can find a few people to bring your luggage up. Zhou Jingnian and Chen Lin led them up the 3rd floor, but Su Zhao hesitated for a few seconds before following them. They are family, she is an outsider, so it's still inconvenient. She walked around the living room twice and before she could sit down, she heard Tao Yining's sharp voice coming from upstairs. How did you let her live here? This is my room. Su Zhao paused and looked up at the staircase. Is the room she mentioned the one she is currently living in? Chapter 9. No more bullying of you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. How did you let her live here? This is my room. Tao Yining's voice was filled with anger. Su Zhao felt as if he was being choked by the sound, feeling a bit breathless. She moved uncontrollably and walked to the platform between the stairs on the 1st and 2nd floors, where she could hear the sound of voices upstairs. Tao Yining, why don't I know when this place will become your room? Zhou Jingnian's voice remained as gentle as before. The two elders seemed to advise something, but their voices were too low for Su Zhao to hear clearly. The next second, Tao Yining's voice came with a crying tone. I live here every time I come, brother. You know I love this room the most. Her nose-twitching voice was very clear, accusing him, I'm your sister. Su Zhao is just a country bumpkin begging for help from her grandfather, you don't need to be so good to her. Su Zhao's legs were a bit weak, and she leaned lightly against the wall, with decorative reliefs on her back, as if to remind her of something. But Zhou Jingnian seemed very angry, and his voice became hard and cold. Tao Yining, I told you yesterday that Su Zhao is my real sister in my house. My grandfather and I both think so. If you continue to be unfriendly to her, just get out of the Zhou family. You are not welcome here. Jingnian, what do you mean by this? Yin is just having a little temper. As an older brother, are you not willing to tolerate anything at all? Aunt Tang, I have already tolerated her little temper, enough. Zhou Jingnian's words were merciless. I repeat, this is the Zhou family, and you are at most slightly closer relatives. Su Zhao is our child. If you cannot respect her, then leave my house. Tao Yining cried out with a wow sound, her small leather shoes tapping on the ground, making a clack 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 sound. She shouted, I'll never talk to you again, and quickly ran downstairs. When she saw Su Zhao huddled in the corner, Tao Yining stopped and glared at her fiercely. What kind of outfit do you put on? Don't even look at yourself. Her parents followed her down. Zhou Jingnian also walked down, followed by Chen Lin with a face full of anger. Su Zhao's eyes were hot and his body seemed to be nailed down, unable to move. The girl trembled and said, I'm sorry, I didn't listen on purpose. Zhou Jingnian slowed down and approached her, pressing his hands on her slender shoulders. Xiao Zhao, what she said is not right. Don't take it to heart, he said. His palms were warm, and the heat gradually melted the cold ice inside Su Zhao's body. Don't worry, don't cry, I'll take care of it. I won't let anyone bully you again. Zhou Jingnian lifted his hand and rubbed her short hair like last night. You and Yuan Yaoyao will go for a walk, and after you come back, there will be no one in the house to dislike, I promise. Su Zhao blinked his eyes, and the tears that had previously surfaced were collected. She looked at the inconspicuous mole on his collarbone and said, No, it's okay. Jingnian brother, don't make it unpleasant for me and them. Zhou Jingnian smiled and said, Don't worry, it's not all for you. He patted Su Zhao's shoulder and stood up straight, saying, But I can't tell you yet. It's a secret. In another week. I'll talk to you later. Su Zhao was confused and didn't know what his strange words meant. Zhou Jingnian looked at Chen Lin and said, Aunt Lin, take Xiao Zhao to find Yuan Yaoyao and find a driver to take them to the mall for a stroll. Chen Lin responded with, Good, and took Su Zhao's hand as she went downstairs, muttering, Really, that little girl is not very old and her speech is too unpleasant. Zhou Jingnian looked at the little girl in front of him, standing on the stairs and smiling slightly. It wasn't until they turned the corner of the wall that he let down the curved corners of his mouth. Aunt Tang, Uncle Tang. Oh, the money and power they have earned from the group over the years, as well as the wine and rice bags they have stuffed in, should all be dealt with. Chen Lin specifically sent a message to Yuan Yaoyao, briefly stating that she had just been unhappy and asking her to pay attention to Su Zhao's emotions. Yuan Yaoyao was very practical. She first took Su Zhao to the video game city, where she slacked off, shot, fished, and caught dolls. The two girls played around. Hand over the bag of dolls caught to the driver and bring them back to the car, and Yuan Yaoyao accompanies her to the clothing store. Su Zhao was tired from trying on clothes, but Yuan Yaoyao still felt that it wasn't enough. Yao Yao, is that enough? I spent a lot of money today. Su Zhao tugged at the curtain of the fitting room, his tone conflicted. Yuan Yaoyao stuffed two dresses in and said, No, it's Mr. Hua's money anyway, and he said he wants to dress you up beautifully, otherwise my salary will be deducted. Of course, Zhou Jingnian did not say this, but Yuan Yaoyao felt that it was completely okay to lie a little to persuade Su Zhao. When Su Zhao walked out of the mall, he had already changed into new clothes, a sailor suit paired with a uniform skirt, white calf socks, and brand new small leather shoes, pure and cute. Yuan Yaoyao touched Su Zhao's hairtail that had just been trimmed by a senior stylist with satisfaction and said, Our Zhao Zhao is really beautiful. When we dress up, she looks like a pure beauty. Alright, this little face, this leg, tsk tsk tsk. Su Zhao blushed when she praised her and said, Yao Yao, there's no such exaggeration. Yuan Yaoyao let out a soft hum and said, Where's the exaggeration? It's just that you're very beautiful. But you're too thin now. After 2 months when Aunt Lin raises you fat, you'll be even more beautiful. Sitting in the waiting car outside, the driver uncle also smiled and praised Su Zhao for a while, making her face even redder. The Zhou family is very quiet, and the flowers in the garden are tilting their heads in the sunlight, swaying gently with waves of hot wind. Chen came out to help move things, explaining that Zhou Jingnian had gone to work at the company and had been very busy during this period. She praised Zhao again for her beautiful appearance, like a female student on TV. Just now, Jingnian drove those few people away. Uncle Zhang's car didn't even park in the garage, and his luggage wasn't fully unloaded. He just pulled it back to the hotel, Chen said in a low voice, explaining the situation to her. Oh, their faces have turned green. They really make me happy, huh? Su Zhao was still a bit worried. Will this really not cause him trouble? After all, he was a relative. If we had a falling out because of her, it would be too bad. Chen shook her head and said, if Jingnian says it's okay, then it must be okay. Don't worry. Su Zhao ate alone, unpacked the clothes with Yuan Yaoyao, and watched several aunties wash the dolls they picked up today. The night was heavy, and Su Zhao looked at his phone in a daze, unconsciously lying on the sofa with his eyes closed. When she opened her eyes again, she sat up and her gaze drifted inexplicably towards the window. Su Zhao opened the French window and went to the balcony, looking at the dim but bright lights in the distance. After blowing for a while, she was about to go back to her room to sleep when she lowered her head and saw the man on the lounge chair on the second-floor terrace. And the corner of his mouth curved slightly, as if he had been looking at her for a while. The man smiled and said, "Come down." Chapter 10. Gentleness and Cleanliness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Get down. Su Zhao seemed to be bewitched by his voice, and when he came to his senses, his feet were already standing on the terrace. The lying man sat up and patted the other recliner beside him, gesturing for her to come and sit. Zhou Jingnian's voice was a bit tired as he said, "Why aren't you sleeping so late? It's past 1 o'clock now." He stayed here for 2 hours, and the light in the little girl's room hasn't been turned off. Su Zhao sat down and obediently placed his hands on his knees, saying, "I accidentally fell asleep on the sofa just now." She hesitated for a few seconds and cautiously asked, "What about you?" Zhou Jingnian smiled and slowly picked up the nearby kettle and cup. His voice echoed along with the sound of water flowing. "Anyway, I can't sleep when I go back to my room. Why don't I take a look at the scenery here? But there will be mosquitoes in summer." Zhou Jingnian raised his chin on the table and said, "So I ordered mosquito-repellent aromatherapy." Su Zhao took the water he handed over with both hands and nodded as he looked at the light green bottle. The topic ended, and the atmosphere inexplicably quieted down, leaving only the rustling of leaves. Zhou Jingnian stood up and moved his legs, saying, "Did you have fun today?" Speaking of this, Su Zhao's mouth curved and said, Yao Yao took me to the video game city, and we also caught a lot of dolls." Sure enough, it's still a child. Zhou Jingnian turned his head to look at the balcony on the other side of her room where he hung clothes and said, "I see, I hung a pole." Su Zhao blinked, pursed her lips, and laughed again. She remembered another thing. "In the morning, are they really okay?" Zhou Jingnian sat down with his gaze parallel to hers and said, "It's really okay, don't worry." The man lay down on the chair lazily and said, "If I had known they were going too far, I shouldn't have agreed to let them stay at home." Su Zhao asked in confusion, "They are your relatives, why did they stay in a hotel before?" "Because I'm not familiar with them," Zhou Jingnian turned to her and explained earnestly, "Besides, even if we are familiar, the things they do in the company are enough for me to make up my mind to commit acts of righteousness and annihilate our family." Su Zhao stared and said, "So, now." Zhou Jingnian curled his lips and smiled, "The big fish is ready to take the bait. So Xiao Zhao, don't worry, they're not a problem for me." Su Zhao understood and his suspended heart calmed down. "By the way, what should I prepare for Grandpa Zhou's funeral?" Zhou Jingnian was stunned for 2 seconds, and his originally bright gaze suddenly darkened without answering her. Zhao panicked and quickly said, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it." Zhou Jingnian looked at the night, the neon lights in the city came up, and the stars could not be seen. He said, "Do you think Grandpa missed us? There is a saying that the dead become stars, but here, the stars are separated by lights, they cannot see the stars, and the stars cannot see them." Before Zhao could figure out how to answer the conversation, he continued, "Buy some flowers for Grandpa. He loves flowers the most, and he personally chooses the flowers in the yard." He looked like a little boy who was injured but still choked his neck and said he didn't hurt, making people feel like he would turn his head and hide in the corner of the wardrobe, secretly crying. Zhao couldn't bear it anymore and said, "Brother Jingnian." Zhou Jingnian turned his head to look at her with a gentle gaze and said, "What kind of flowers do you like?" "We can buy many kinds," Grandpa said. "His funeral should not only have white and yellow flowers, but also colorful ones." Zhao doesn't know many flowers, but when he was a child in the village, he saw the fragrant peas climbing on the railing of the neighboring family. Pink mixed with white flowers, with soft petals and a hint of transparency, emitting a faint sweet fragrance. Gentleness and cleanliness were Zhao's first impressions of the Zhou family's grandfather and grandson. Zhao's lips slightly raised. "I like fragrant pea tofu pudding, the pink one. It's very beautiful." Zhou Jingnian nodded and said, "Okay, let's go find a flower shop tomorrow and book it together. Then we can go to school." "Okay." Zhao took off his shoes and sat cross-legged on the recliner. "Do we need to buy any other flowers?" "Peony, rose, tulip, goldfish grass, jasmine. Buy some of them all." Zhou Jingnian lay on the chair, feeling a bit tired inexplicably, and his tone slowed down. Taking advantage of him closing his eyes, Zhao boldly looked at him directly. Zhou Jingnian's eyelashes are very long, but not too curly. When he closes his eyes, blood vessels can be faintly seen on the eyelids, and his skin is very thin. Zhao was staring at his eyelashes in a daze when his eyes suddenly opened, reflecting her in the black pupils. Zhou Jingnian closed his eyes again, frowned, sat up in his chair, and sighed, "It's late. Let's go back and rest. We'll go out tomorrow after breakfast." Zhao's heart was pounding at the sight he had just seen, and he was so nervous that he stuttered when speaking. Oh, okay. Zhou Jingnian thought the little girl was tired and said softly, "Let's go." He escorted Zhao to the staircase and said, "Good night," first. As expected, he heard the girl's soft voice again, and this time he added something else. "Good night, Jingnian brother, good dream." In the morning, thinking about going out with Zhou Jingnian today, Zhao wore a new outfit she bought yesterday. A doll-necked shirt with blue and white fine plaid patterns, paired with a knee-high deep blue denim camisole skirt, cute. When Zhou Jingnian went downstairs and saw the girl on the chair in the restaurant, his heart softened. Her little one, wearing such a small dress, with soft hair scattered around her ears, looks like a obedient little white rabbit lying in its nest. Upon hearing his footsteps, little rabbit turned its head and curved its smiling eyes, saying, "Good morning, brother Jingnian." "Good morning, Xiao Zhao." Zhou Jingnian pulled out his chair and sat opposite her. He smelled the aroma of rice porridge in the air, and suddenly felt greedy. "Aunt Lin, can I have congee today?" Chen Lin poked her head out of the kitchen and smiled, causing her eyes to furrow with a few fine lines. "Okay, you have an appetite. Aunt Lin will make whatever you want to eat." Zhou Jingnian was amused by her and said, "Okay, then thank Aunt Lin a lot." After breakfast, Zhou Jingnian drove out with Zhao. The flower shop sent by the assistant is more than 30 kilometers away from Qian Mountain residence, and it takes half an hour to drive. Zhao sat in the passenger seat, his eyes not resting for a moment. The wide and flat road, with endless traffic, was considered novel to her. Zhou Jingnian felt a bit amused and joked, "Isn't it just the road? You're so mesmerized. Su Zhao's gaze fell on his profile and his tone was light. Because I haven't seen such a big road in the city before. Even on the highway, there isn't such a big road on our side. Zhou Jingnian understood and said, this is not even the busiest place in northern Beijing. Next weekend, I'll take you to the second ring road to see the night view. He thought for a moment and said, is it almost your birthday? It happens to be next Saturday, Su Zhao said softly.